What if the root cause of your chronic fatigue, brain fog, or persistent illness wasn't stress or bad luck, but a hidden invader inside your body? Stealth infections are wreaking havoc on millions of people, silently undermining their health while remaining undetected. Welcome to In Pursuit of Life, where we dive deep into the journey of creating a life worth living through the lens of holistic health. I'm Dr. Caleb, a chiropractor and holistic healthcare provider, and I'm here to help you discover how true wellness isn't just about fixing what's broken, but about nurturing your mind, body, and spirit as a whole. Let's get started with today's episode as we journey together in the pursuit of a healthier and more fulfilling life. In this episode, we are going to talk about stealth infections and how these unseen invaders may be the hidden cause of your persistent health struggles. These stealth infections are disease-causing organisms like parasites, Borrelia burgdorferi, which causes Lyme disease, the Epstein-Barr virus, and much more. These stealth infections can also play contributing roles in the development of a wide variety of other conditions, such as chronic gut issues, chronic fatigue syndrome, dementia, neurological disorders, and even autoimmune conditions. If left undetected and untreated, these mischievous microbes cause or contribute to many of the chronic conditions that are becoming more common issues in our country. Let's go ahead and dive in as we pull back the curtain on these unseen enemies to uncover their clever tricks, as well as discuss why these stealth infections are a growing concern in the U.S. and which of these infections we see most commonly in our clinic. So let's start with why we call them stealth infections. As you may guess from the word stealth, these invaders are very good at hiding and operating under the radar. So what exactly are these stealthy invaders hiding from? The primary thing that these covert agents are hiding from is, of course, our own immune system. Many of these infections are able to work their way through the different systems of the body without being detected by the immune system and are therefore able to cause all sorts of mischief and mayhem without consequence. So how exactly are these infiltrators able to avoid detection from our highly skilled immune system? There are actually a variety of ways that these sneaky pests can put on an invisibility cloak of sorts as they travel through the body. One of the most common ways stealth pathogens avoid detection is by creating a biofilm layer, which is a polymeric or slimy substance that acts as a shield or barrier to the immune system's identification and response components. Another way these miscreants can become invisible is by having deficient or incomplete cell walls. In particular, what these cell walls lack is the molecular connection sites that the immune system uses to identify them with. Essentially, they have no ID markers to signify whether they are friend or foe, and the immune system won't take the chance of attacking a potential friend except under severe circumstances. Other pathogens prefer to use tactics more in line with identity theft. These agents are able to use molecular mimicry, in which they are able to conceal themselves using the cellular equivalent of fake IDs to trick the immune system into thinking that they are a natural or normal part of the body. This can happen either from mimicking another cell's connection sites on the cell wall or through the use of plasmids or shareable DNA that allow them to disguise themselves as a normal cell of the body. In particular, some parasites will cover themselves with host proteins or glycoconjugates so the immune system doesn't recognize them as a foreign substance. As you can see, stealth infections have many techniques at their disposal to keep themselves from being exposed to the immune system, but that is not the only thing that they are good at hiding from. These unseen invaders are also particularly skilled at hiding from medical diagnosis as well. The reason for this is threefold. The first is that many people that are infected actually show no symptoms because their body is relatively healthy and able to fight off or at least contain the infections so they don't create any noticeable effect on the body. These pathogens don't give up, though, and often bide their time and wait for an opportune moment to strike. This moment comes in the form of some major challenge that weakens the immune system enough that these sneaky saboteurs can gain a foothold and become more active in our body. This immune challenge can come in the form of another significant illness or health struggle, but we also often see that stress is the culprit that gives them that chance. Episodes of prolonged or severe stress can significantly diminish immune function, which gives these invaders a chance to gain ground and really get settled in. I experienced this in my own life after a 5-month period of extreme stress, and even after that season was over, I found that I wasn't able to bounce back to my normal self afterwards. Many of my patients have also had similar stories of how big stress events preceded their early symptoms, which over time developed into debilitating and even life altering conditions. The second issue is that the symptoms that typically present with these infections are symptoms that are commonly shared across a wide range of health conditions. Symptoms such as chronic fatigue, brain fog, insomnia, pain, personality changes, even depression, anxiety, GI distress, memory issues, and even headaches are all common for stealth infections as well as a slew of other conditions. Another issue is that the onset of these symptoms may be too delayed or vague to accurately diagnose these stealth infections instead of some other condition that may present with some similar circumstances. The third issue is that these invaders are often difficult to find with traditional lab testing. Sometimes it is a location issue, as though many of these invaders do travel through the blood and stools, which are the primary tests. There are also many that find other places in the body to settle in. It could also be a timing issue, as some of these invaders travel through different systems of the body at different stages of maturity. So lab samples might be taken at the wrong stage of the pathogen's development to be able to be properly identified. Unfortunately, this can lead some doctors to misdiagnose or even dismiss patients because the lab test came back with relatively normal or inconclusive findings. Unfortunately, this can lead to the root cause of a person's illness to remain unrecognized and untreated, and of course cause more and more issues as time goes on. With everything we have discussed so far, it is plain to see that these invaders are appropriately named as stealth infections. At this point, you may be thinking that this is fascinating information, but how does it apply to me? We don't have to worry about these kinds of infections in the US, right? Well, unfortunately, that's not the case at all. Many of these pathogens and the resulting conditions are on the rise in the US, and I actually think that they have been a significant concern for much longer than we realize. We just haven't been aware of it. I believe that these pathogens are a lot more common than we tend to think, and I think some of this is because the world is more connected than ever since international airplane travel has become much more common. So as the ease of travel between countries has improved, the world has become more of a global community than ever. Infections or diseases that were once isolated to specific regions of the world can now hitchhike on boats, trains, or even airplanes and quite literally travel around the world. I think the most recent pandemic was a prime example of how microbes can travel like that. You may still have a higher likelihood of being infiltrated by one of these sneaky saboteurs if you travel to countries and regions that are more commonly associated with them, but that still doesn't mean that one of them couldn't find you in your own neighborhood. I think another reason it is a growing concern is that more people are becoming aware of the potential threat that these microbes present and are more actively and more intentionally searching for them, especially in regards to ongoing and persistent conditions where diagnoses seem unclear or diverse and various methods of treatment remain ineffective. The concern should be great indeed because as these conditions continue to go undiagnosed and untreated, the havoc they can generate in the body is very substantial. Many of these infections are opportunistic creatures that steal vital resources that our body needs to function properly, which can lead to things like nutrient deficiencies, anemias, and dysregulation across many different systems of the body. Many of these conditions also create chronic inflammation in the body, which is believed to be a key component in the development of autoimmune conditions, which is when the immune system starts attacking the body's own cells. If you think about it, stealth infections actually make a lot of sense as a driving force for autoimmune conditions. Even though the immune system may not be able to identify a stealth infection, it will become aware that some enemy is near as the body becomes more and more compromised. Think about it this way. Even if you don't see a fire, you know something is wrong when the fire alarm and the sprinklers are activated, or if you start smelling smoke, right? So if there is chronic inflammation because the immune system is dealing with the continuous effects of the stealth infection, but can't get to the infection itself, it eventually gets to the point where it starts attacking everything hoping that it will be able to take it out. This is why it is important to consider these kind of infections and get suitable help as early as possible so layers upon layers of complications aren't able to develop over the years or even decades it may take to find the real cause if we're pursuing other dead end diagnoses. There have been many patients who came into our clinic and wished that they had been able to get a proper diagnosis and treatment a long time ago before going through all the pain, the confusion, and especially all the medical expenses that built up over the years. So now that we have a clearer understanding of the kind of impact these stealth infections can have on our health, what are some of the most common types that we see in our clinic? There are many types of stealth infections that we have helped our patients overcome in the last several years, but the top 3 types would have to be parasites, mold exposure, and Lyme disease. Now, the most common is definitely parasites. And I know many people shudder and even have little nightmares when we discuss parasites, especially when thinking about the different types of parasitic worms that might be inhabiting their body. As horrifying as thinking about those worms are, there are actually many types of protozoan or single-celled parasites, and many of those can actually cause more significant and emergent issues than some of the worms. Even though we often struggle to believe that parasites are an issue in the U.S., the CDC in May of 2014, that's actually over a decade ago now, released a list of 5 parasitic infections that they consider to be neglected parasitic infections and significant health problems. These 5 are Chagas disease, which is caused by the Trypanosoma cruzi parasite, toxoplasmosis, which is caused by Toxoplasma gondii, a parasite commonly associated with cats, neurocysticercosis, which is caused by Taenia solium, also known as pork tapeworm, and toxocariasis, which is caused by Toxocara canis, a parasite commonly associated with dogs. And then lastly, trichomoniasis, which is caused by the sexually transmitted parasite Trichomonas vaginalis. There are also many other common types of parasites that we see regularly in the clinic, and each of them have their own special ways of making our lives miserable. We also see mold issues a lot in the clinic, especially during this time of year. Mold is a common part of nature's ability to decompose and recycle materials like plants and trees to provide nutrients for other plants to grow. This is even more common in the fall and in our area, even into milder winter conditions. So mold exposure is another type of infection that can commonly affect our patients, and we often help them to manage the impact it has on their bodies while they try to figure out how they were exposed and the appropriate steps to decrease exposure in the future. Another interesting thing about mold exposure is how it can influence mood regulation. You may have even heard the term mold rage before, and actually parasites can also have a dynamic impact on mood regulation as well. With mold, EMF exposure is another important consideration, as research has shown that it can increase spore and mycotoxin production by a staggering 400%. Lyme disease is another stealth infection that we see on a regular basis. If you have experienced or seen a bullseye rash, then you are likely already familiar with this one. It is actually one of the major tick-borne diseases that significantly impacts the health of people across the country, especially when antibiotic treatment isn't effective. So when that happens, some of these patients continue to have persistent or chronic Lyme disease symptoms. It is often missed in diagnosis because the Western blot or ELISA tests used to identify Lyme disease have a limited window of effectiveness or specificity following infection. Infection doesn't always come through a tick bite or include the bullseye rash either, and there are also many other tick-borne infections that can be co-infections with Lyme that can also cause a wider variety of complications as well. So if you suspect you may have Lyme disease, it is important that you find a doctor that is experienced in helping people overcome this, as this infection can cause particularly disruptive or even debilitating conditions, especially when it gets into the neurology or the nervous system. So as we continue through this series on stealth infections, we will continue to dive deeper into each of these conditions and how they sneakily sabotage your body. We will also highlight some of the ways that you may be able to fight against these invaders on your own, or when it is time to seek out some expert help to support you in your journey to a healthier and more fulfilling life. One thing to keep in mind is that the earlier these infections are identified and treated, the less they will be able to destroy your body and even more your life. So make sure you come back for the rest of my videos as we continue to focus on stealth infections. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of In Pursuit of Life. I hope you found today's insights informative and valuable. If you enjoyed this topic and want to hear more like it, please give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you're always in the loop for new episodes. That's it for today's episode. I hope the rest of your day is filled with joy and blessings, and until next time, keep pursuing life.